into 5 minutes of question and answer. Is there any question and answer this time?
I'm looking at the numbers provided in the PowerPoint, and when I add up the numbers for each of the different areas, it doesn't add up to the same number of students that you have indicated in the following slide.
The numbers.
So when I add up the different sections for each of the things, those do not add up to 63,138.
Okay, let me see. I don't know why that would be.
I just have them, I open them all in Excel, and it adds up to 61,205.
Okay, let me see. Oh, that's probably because of Hamilton.
So being added?
Hamilton, yeah, so Hamilton does have students currently registered as the Hamilton major. We don't have the data for Hamilton. All we know is that Hamilton deserves a seat because Hamilton is a college. So I've asked the registrar, I've asked Drew for the numbers. They are not able to be provided. There just hasn't been enough data yet. But there are currently, I think the website indicates around 1,500 to 2,000 students in the Hamilton College, which would add up to that change in numbers.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to the discrepancy mentioned.
Yes.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, so unfortunately, like, trust me, I tried to get those numbers. I also think that the class seat, losing a seat, would make a lot of sense here. The people who are going to that PPEL major are the philosophy majors, the economic majors, the political science, the criminology. So these are all college of liberal arts and sciences majors who are then making the great migration over to the Hamilton Center, which...
College.
The Hamilton College, yes.
Or Hamilton School.
The Hamilton School,
Technical name.
Technically.
Oh wait, my bad.
Hamilton School. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so obviously I understand your metric, and I understand the kind of objectivity behind it about round down by default, and then you round up the ones largest until you hit that mark of 50. Are we committed to staying at 50 seats?
Yes.
The Constitution does not say that we have to stay at 50. It allows between 40 and 60 as long as the fall and spring are the same semester.
Yes.
Right? So my question is mainly because we do have a couple that we're on, especially like class, we're on the very edge of rounding them up to that next seat. Would it not make sense to make sure that those students are accounted for as equally as possible within the confines of the Constitution?
So, yeah, the first thing that I would say is I'm not in favor of changing to 50. I think that us as an institution want to mirror the United States government and the state government as well as we possibly can. There's 100 senators in the United States Senate. There's 100 senators in the Florida Senate. I think that keeping it as 50 and 50 is proper representation. Even class, though it's the technically sixth one that would get rounded up, it's still only at an 8.5. So I think that, in my opinion, I would keep it at 50. I do know what you're indicating. The Constitution does say that it's anywhere between 40 and 60, but that would mean that we would have to have the same amount in the spring and in the fall. So we would have to reapportion the fall for the same amount of numbers. It's under my opinion that we just keep it at 50. I think that that's where it makes the most sense, seeing as we have basically a very similar setup to the way that the United States government is set up, and how that's what it's meant to be with the judicial branch, legislative branch, and executive branch. But I completely understand your point, and I think that's a really good one. I just don't completely agree with changing the numbers of seats.
Sure.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, we now move into we now move into 5 minutes of debate. Or is there any debate?
I'll start.
Yes.
To start, I really like the idea of combining some of the schools into their colleges. That's been something that's confused me for a while now, that they're represented separately, so I think it makes a lot of sense to include them, and I think it's more representative to do it that way. So I strongly agree with that choice, and I think that will make the spring apportionment stronger. On the topic of number of seats, in my opinion, it's more important to have more accurate representation, more granular representation, rather than sticking to the confines of the round number of 100. I understand the benefits of it, but I think more equitable and representative representation outweighs that. So those are my thoughts on that particular issue. overall, I like a lot of these changes, but I do think it would be worth looking at possibly going a bit over 50 to iron out some of those kinks.
Well, I have a question pursuant to that. When you say that we should be doing stuff based by the numbers when we edit the numbers, so would you say then that like over 0.5 would be round up, under 0.5 would be round down?
I imagine there could be an element of case by case, but yes.
To me, the idea of like having a number that we try to match makes it so that we have an understandable metric and representative metric by which to round up and round down. Because when you get into switching into the minutia of like saying 0.6 to 1 versus 0.4 to 1, that creates inequities in representation where 0.4 is represented as 1 and 0.8 is represented as 1. Those are different numbers of people, and especially in the perspective of a large school like UF, that is a lot of people that you're being discounted or overcounted. And so I think that following a metric like top 50 makes it, or like 50, makes it a lot easier to create like a more equitable standard of representation. Where like, if you just look at the numbers of like who we're rounding up like 0.89 or like 0.9, instead of rounding up a 0.4 or a 0.2 or rounding down a 0.4 or a 0.2. So I think that it's more accurate to do it this way.
I guess to clarify the answer I gave to your question, the way I personally would do it is based on over greater than or lesser than a half. So 0.5 rounds up, 0.4 rounds down. But I absolutely hear your point, and I do think there's a lot of merit to that.
Yeah, again, like that becomes the same question of like, let's say that we round up a 0.9 in this model versus we round down a 0.4. That is 0.1 overrepresented or underrepresented versus 0.4 under or overrepresented. And so I think that this is a better bright line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I understand for the metric keeping it to 50 makes it so we can very easily do these round up and round down without having to worry about it. I do worry that, the people who wrote the Constitution gave us that tool for a reason, and I think it would be, we should be using those tools that we have them applicable to make sure that people are being represented in the best manner. And if that number is 50, then I'm okay with doing that, but if it comes out, we do have these people that are over half of a seat and they're not getting that extra, population, but they have students that are being slightly underrepresented in those cases. And then if we were to examine, add 1 or 2 seats to make sure that those departments and those colleges were as best represented as possible, I think that would be a conversation worth having. I don't think it's worth spending hours right now going through every 40 through 60 to determine the best case right now, but I think that is an important tool that we shouldn't discount. I mean, even in the US Senate, we do see problems with it keeping a solid 50 because we do have these states that get much more representation per person just because of these artificial kind of guidelines and divisions, right? So I understand trying to match the Senate in a certain way and the US thing, but that system does itself have a lot of flaws. So I don't want us to be locked into that if we can do better for our students.
Maybe this is just me not understanding the math very well, but like how, because like even if we did add the seats, wouldn't we have to recalculate every single time? So like if you're doing 50 seats, we look right now and we're like, well, let's move up the 5, like the closest ones. Wouldn't that just change the number? And then once we, you know what I mean? It gets messy in terms of like, if we have 50 seats, we look and we're like, let's give class 51. Well, then now we have to do everything by 51. So then once we do that, we'll have another number that's close to the edge or not close to the edge. So every time we move the goalpost, I think it just messes the math up.
Yeah, so
it's just in like a weird.
Statistics-wise, what you would do is you would do the exact same thing you did, except you would change that 50 to these different values, right? Which you could get the best apportionment with 40 seats, right? But what you would do is you would look at those numbers before you round up or down, and you say, okay, after we do this, how much total are we rounding up or rounding down? People are being over.
Question and answer period.
Is there a motion to lay the committee to rest until called upon?
So